we have a couple of good panels and important panels left. The first one is a somewhat limited one. We have the honor of having Pål Jonson, who is the Minister for Defense of Sweden, who is here on a bilateral visit for a couple of days, looking at the different aids that Sweden and others are giving, but also doing an assessment of the situation. We take the opportunity to ask the Minister a couple of questions, and I will do it. We only have 15 minutes, but there will be the possibility for you as well. 2 questions, Paul. One, starting from a slightly more narrow perspective, say something about what Sweden is doing in terms of the military support.
Well, thank you so much, Carl, and thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor, and thank you for all the important work you're doing for a free and independent Ukraine. Now, we just presented our last support package on Tuesday, which was our biggest package so far. It was about $700 million. The combined value of our military assistance now is about $3 billion, which is about 20% of our defense budget. The focus this time around was on 2 things: getting the Ukrainians what you need the most, and that's air defense systems, such as RBS-70, but also providing you with more artillery ammunition, which I think is really crucial because Russia right now is, of course, out shooting the Ukrainian side. Besides from that, we also made a principal stance of assuring that the Ukrainians also get newly produced defense material as well. In our case, it's about our ability to produce fresh out of the production site with new combat wheel CV90s as well, the IF weaves that Ukrainians are working. Last point I just want to stress on this package as well was that now we're going into the maritime domain, of course bandwagoning on some of the success that the Ukrainian side has had, and we're joining the coalition that's being led by the UK and Norway, the maritime coalition, providing them with the Ukrainian side with combat boats and also group boats as well. I think that's going to be helpful for the Ukrainian side. So a little bit on what we're doing here now. If I should say my priorities for the Swedish support is to assure that it makes a difference for the Ukrainian side on the battlefield. And that's not just about sending platforms. That's about assuring that we have training, logistics, maintenance, and spare parts. I think that's absolutely crucial as well. They sometimes tend to be a little bit too much political fireworks when you do donations, but I really want to make sure that the Ukrainian side win, and therefore we have to focus on some of the less dramatic but very important things also for battlefield victory.
You mentioned the issue of artillery ammunition, which has been much debated in the media and also previously during the conference here. You know the details of this. Could you give us your view of both from the Swedish Nordic perspective, it's fairly integrated, and how you see the debate developing in terms of the capability development on primarily the European side?
Sure. Unfortunately, I know quite a lot of the details, and it's not so encouraging always. I think we have to have at least 14 or 16 different types of 155. Now, it's not that you can't always use them, but at least they're not certified to use in different systems as well. So what we're doing right now is that we are exporting our fragmented the defense industrial base to the Ukrainian sides, because we haven't paid enough attention on boring but important stuff as standardization. You know, that's one crucial thing. The other thing, I think, which has been a crude awakening for us as well, that this is a war of attrition, or it's really a war of warehouses. And thus, a strong defense industrial base, that's part of credible deterrence right now. We have big challenges on the European defense industrial base. I tell you at least 3 problems we're grappling with right now. One is that we have too little spare parts and ammunition. I would reward anyone who goes out and say, I'm investing into spare parts and ammunition. Yeah. Politicians like me, we love to say that we're getting new systems, but we need to make that we also deliver on the enablement. So that's one thing. The other challenge we have right now is that we have skyrocketing prices. Per unit cost is going through the roof right now. That's a big, if you want to have bang for the buck, that's a big challenge as well. And the third thing is that we have too long lead times when it comes to our defense industrial base. You know, before we can provide the platforms, at least 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So a defense industrial base shaped for peacetime situation, that's not good when you're in a war of attrition, I think. So we are doing, I think, quite good things in the Nordic-Baltic sphere. We have something called Nordefco++, which now the Nordics plus the Baltics and the Netherlands, UK and the US on as well. When we do joint procurement, that's effective because we can push the prices a little bit more, we can place larger orders, and we can incentivize the business to ramp up their production. And we also know we're going to invest into things as artillery munitions for a decade to come, at least, because we're all also getting quite tough NATO requirements. So there's much we need to do, and we need to cooperate more on a European basis as well to get our house in order when it comes to the defense industrial base.
And where do you see the greatest challenges? Because we also have a challenge. Artillery ammunition is very important, but you might argue old stuff. But then we have a lot of new stuff. I mean, what Ukrainians have shown in terms of drones and artificial intelligence, dependence on space assets and things like that. Is Europe sufficiently forward on these issues?
I think there's much we can learn from the Ukrainian side, and it's really encouraging to see how the Ukrainians' ability to out-innovate the Russians play a crucial role. So, of course, lessons learned from the field, from the battlefield Ukraine is indispensable, and of course you all see it on I mean, this being a combination of World War I and World War II, or World War III, where you see, of course, the trenches and the war of attrition, at the same time as you see the kill chain being shortened with the sensor to shooter being very quick, because the Ukrainians have agile platforms, they have access to AI and support. Of course, satellite-based communications and intelligence play a crucial role. I think long-range strike capabilities, air defense system is also factors that is innovative, and of course unmanned systems in all domains, but especially in the maritime domain and in the aerial domain. I think those are factors that's been shaping the battlefield, which we are learning very much from as well.
If we look at the other side, that is the Russians, what do you, and there's an element of guesswork because there are lots of things, some things we know, there are a number of things we don't know. How do you see the development of their capabilities and also their abilities to actually conduct this war as we move ahead?
Well, I am not impressed by the operational and tactical observations we're doing on the Russian side. But many people underestimated the Ukrainian side during 2022. And I think some also underestimated the Russians in 2023 in one regard, and that's their resilience. I give it that they have been able to absorb enormous casualties, and they keep on going, and they're able to generate more forces. And what's of course been happening during this year is that they've been ramping up both their economy and their defense industrial base, which we have of course to respond to in a similar way. So in that regard, they have a certain thing going their way right now. At the same time, I'm also very encouraged. So what I see on the Black Sea, where of course for the first time in 100 years the Russians can't no longer use Sevastopol, for example, and they're very much pushed further to the east. So they're not impressive tactically and operationally, but they've been determined. So we just have to respond in kind and ramp up our production. I think is really crucial for us.
And on the Black Sea, I think a very impressive fact is that the export now through the Black Sea port is nearly back to what it was before the war, which is quite impressive in view of the fact that the Russians have been trying to do whatever they can to stop that. That's really a massive And just you repeat more or less or say the same thing as I've been trying to say. We haven't really seen any impressive operations by the Russians. We see a lot of quantity, but we don't see much of quality as of yet. That might change. We should also be prepared for it. They were fairly good at defensive operations. But you don't win a war by defense. It's important that Ukraine is also good at defense, and so far in this war, it has shown that defense is easier than offense. That's a balance that has been going back and forth in the history of warfare. But defense seems to be what is working at the moment.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that what you see is of course, a certain Russian tenacity and resilience. And then at the same time also you see a great propensity to take risks. Of course, they advanced a few kilometers right now, but at an enormous price. Of course, with up maybe to 350,000 casualties, maybe have lost 6,000 tanks, so they are certainly getting weakened. But the propensity to take risk and losses is a factor that we're cognizant and aware of course.
We shouldn't monopolize this as a conversation between two Swedes who know each other anyhow. That might get boring, and open up for any other questions that you might have.
All right.
Congressman.
Good news about Sweden now officially becoming a part of NATO. We all celebrate. What is the timeline that the Swedish government is looking at in terms of your metrics to fully assimilate? I think there's a lot of feeling that Sweden, along with some other European countries, punches above its weight. And so how long and in what areas are you focused? I know you're starting to do some training exercises, but what's the plan the next 2-4 years?
Yeah, well, thank you, Congressman, for that. We are hopeful that we're going to be full-fledged members of the alliance very soon, and we think it's going to be good for Sweden, and we think it's going to be good for NATO, and it's going to be good for stability of whole Northern Europe. And I think there's things we can bring to the table which will strengthen the alliance, and of course, such as we're really geopolitically at the heart of the Nordic area, and our area can be a staging and basing area for assuring the defendability of the Baltic states, but also Finland, and that's of course why I had the honor of signing a defense cooperation agreement with Secretary Austin in December, and we hope that will be approved by the Swedish Parliament as well. So besides from that, I think that we like to think we know the Baltic Sea inside out, both with our intelligence community, but also within the underwater domain. We are also a country who would like to think that we punch above our weight when it comes to a defense industrial base. And I find that helpful also when we're supporting the Ukrainians, because it's easier for us to work out logistics and maintenance for the CV-90, for the Archer, for the RBS-70, when we have companies inside Sweden. So I think there's things we can do also on the innovation side for the alliance, and we're going to be joining Diana, which I'm sure you're familiar with NATO's defense accelerator, for example. So many things we can do. Now, the challenge, I don't think, is going to be militarily, because we've been having wins over Libya, we've been in Afghanistan, we've been in Kosovo. We have a high level of interoperability. We will send about 250 staff officers to NATO's command and control functions within the next couple of years. I'm sure we're going to I think it's also going to be a little bit of a mental thing. You have to remember that we come from 200 years of military non-alignment and neutrality. We're going to have to understand that we're not going to defend Sweden inside Sweden any longer. We're going to be doing it with allies. I think that's and we're not going to be defending Sweden alone. So that mental journey as well, I think, is worthwhile for us to focus on, and advocating, of course, why NATO is an indispensable alliance. If I can just say one thing, of course, it's good for us and for NATO that becomes NATO allies. Let me just say, for me, Sweden joining NATO was also about defending the rules-based order, because I'm not going to forget when Foreign Minister Lavrov sent those letters to Sweden and saying that Sweden and Finland could no longer be part of NATO, saying that Sweden and Finland implicitly was part of Russia's sphere of interest. And that did not go down well at all in Sweden. And I always say that Finland and Sweden inside NATO, that's the mother of all unintended consequences for Russian strategic thinking, because they ended up with such a long border with NATO. And they had it coming because they started this war with Ukraine as well.
We have time for one short question. Mikael Gahler from the European Parliament.
Yes, hello, Paul. Good to have you also in Kyiv here and see you again. One question, perhaps you could allude us a bit.
By the way, a very nice tie you have.
Yeah.
Yes, that is my Swedish-Ukrainian tie. It fits both purposes, and the most successful presidency tie ever in the European Union. No, but now on serious issues, can you tell us a bit what the latest state of affairs is in the Council on the refilling of the European Peace Facility? You know, Mr. Borrell is tasked to fill it for the next 4 years. 20 billion should be there, and we need that primarily, of course, for Ukraine, and also, for instance, to pay the idea that the Czech president referred to in Munich, Petr Pavel. He said he had these 800,000 shells, or what it's called, and but it needs the money for that. And I think for such purposes, this would be ideal. They are existing ammunition and could be paid and could be delivered to Ukraine, but for that we need to refill the European Peace Facility. And are you aware how the Hungarians stand, because they blocked the latest 500 million payments? Perhaps it's interesting to hear what the latest news about that is. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Michael. And you have many qualities, but you also speak very good Swedish. I want to take to the record as well. But I think you might be better logged in on the latest in regard to European peace facilities. But I had the pleasure of meeting President Pavel when I was in the Munich Security Conference. I think this is a very innovative way that the Czech has gone about doing this. They say they could provide up to 500,000 shells within a couple of weeks, they're saying. And I think that's commendable and it's effective. And we just have to find the financing for it. We have indicated we're willing to look into it. I think the EU should look into it. But some of those shells are not going to be made inside the EU, you know. But I think for the Ukrainians, it doesn't matter if it's produced inside or outside the EU. What matters is that they achieve operational effect. And therefore, I think we should be very pragmatic on the European basis of approving to that. So I think that proposal is very commendable. I think it's interesting, worthwhile exploring further. What I think is very important is now what is happening, that Norway and Denmark has put long time frameworks for the financial commitments over 5 years. I think that's very good, of course, that France signed its security agreement with Ukraine last week, and the Brits have already done it as well. This kind of long-term commitment, making sure we're in with Ukraine for the long haul, I think is both important strategic communication, but it will make our support for the Ukrainian much more predictable and long-term commitment as well. I think if I just could say one more word, Carl, in regards to what's happening in the Ukraine Defense Contact Group as well. And there, you know, we're revamping the support as well. We're creating this kind of capability coalitions. I think those are good because we can focus not just on the immediate here and now needs for the Ukrainians, which are extensive, but also the long-term commitment here as well, making sure that their armed forces are interoperable with NATO, and in a way also using as a bridge for them, of course, to enter into the Euro-Atlantic family of EU and NATO, and that it's resilient for the long term as well. So that's encouraging of the capability coalitions inside the GDC as well.
Thank you. Thank you for, I think, rather reassuring messages on all of the activities that are ongoing. There are things happening, and even more things will be happening. And thank you for passing by when you are here for important talks during these days. Thank you.